Welcome to Power Lunch Live. We're back. It's our second show of the day. I'm Rhett Power, your host. We do this program every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and this week we're going to do it on Friday. We're on LinkedIn's new live platform. Now, the point of the show is to talk to today's thought leaders, best-selling authors, CEOs, corporate leaders, people who are doing amazing work in the world, people we can learn from so that we can get better at what we do. Now, the fun part about the show is that it's interactive. And the only way that happens is if you ask questions. And that's what we want you to do. We want you to learn what you want to learn and get from these conversations what you need to get. Now, if you like the program, give it a like or share so we can grow our audience and so your network can benefit from the conversations that we're having. Today's is going to be, this afternoon's is going to be, I think, really incredible and really moving. Now, we are broadcasting also on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and I think Twitch and something else. I'm probably missing something. That's exciting. Now, I've got Damon West on the program this afternoon. Damon has an MS in criminal justice. He's a motivational speaker. He's a best-selling author of The Coffee Bean, who we co-wrote that with Jon Gordon. He's now a college professor. And Damon is also someone that got addicted, which we know addiction is a huge issue in the United States. And he paid a really big price for that. We're going to talk about Damon and his journey. We're going to talk about your new book. I know you've got a new book called The Change Agent coming out in March. And I want to know more about that so people can pre-order it. Damon, welcome to the program.
Rhett, thanks a lot for having me, man. It's really an honor to be here. And thank you for ranking The Coffee Bean so high on your Forbes 2020 list. That was I was excited to be on that. Just with the other authors that are there too. I mean, you talk about an august company. It was really nice.
Well, good is good, man. Good. I mean, so it deserved the recognition. I think it's as leaders and parents and everything else. I think it was a good book, and I think that I imagine The Change Agent is going to be pretty good too.
So here's the deal on that. So The Change Agent actually it came out already. It came out in March of last year. Yeah, but I want to talk about The Change Agent too. It's been doing really well, Rhett. I mean, it doesn't sell at the level of The Coffee Bean. Of course, The Coffee Bean, Jon Gordon's attached to The Coffee Bean. Jon Gordon, the guy's huge, man. He's just a huge motivational speaker and author, and adds so much into the dialogue of motivation and positivity and entrepreneurship. So when he brought me along in that book, really becoming a best-selling author, I think is a lot to attribute to Jon Gordon's success that he's already built up along the way. But The Change Agent is, it's my memoir, it's my life story. And it just came out a few months before The Coffee Bean. So it kind of gets mixed up in there. So it's no big deal.
Well, I got to get it then, because for some reason, my brain, I thought it was coming out in March, but I'll have to get a copy of it. There you go. I love props. Props are great.
Yeah. The Change Agent, along with The Coffee Bean. So props are good.
Yeah. Let's talk about that life story because I think you have a unique one. And talk about, you were a college quarterback, All-American kid. If you had to define what the All-American kid looked like, you probably were the poster child.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in a southeast Texas town called Port Arthur, Texas, and Port Arthur is on the Louisiana and Texas Gulf Coast, right there on the border.
Beautiful area. Beautiful area.
Great food, good Cajun food. I got into substance abuse at an early age, but I had a really good family. My parents, for example, Rhett, my parents have been married for 52 years coming up in June. So I didn't come from a broken home. Got an older brother named Brandon, younger brother named Grayson. My dad was a sports writer. He's actually the first sports writer in our part of Texas to put black athletes on the front page of a sports page. And that was in 1971 when he did that for the first time, But he's got a box of hate mail at home to prove the decision was like, taking a stand, doing the right thing. So I always tell people about that to let them know I came from good people with a great moral compass, which I didn't always use. I talk all the time to audiences about belief systems, and bad belief systems are what really haunt us, because a bad belief system tells us to do something the wrong way over and over again. And the longer we hold on to a bad belief system, the harder they are to get rid of. And here's the truth about bad belief systems, Rhett. They usually win out in the end. It's hard to change a belief system, right? Because, I mean, everything is born of thought. So all these great leaders that you meet, they've changed the way people think and believe. We were talking about Dabo Swinney before we got on air. You know, Dabo has changed the way they think at Clemson. He's changed the way they believe. The culture has changed, and their culture of belief is different. So belief systems cut both ways. You know, good ones are the ones you want to have, but bad ones, well, like a bad one I had growing up. You know, I grew up with the belief system, you know, starting out with substance abuse at a young age. All I'm doing is drinking a little beer, smoking a little pot. I'm really not hurting anybody. I'm not even hurting myself. But I couldn't have been more wrong. But I was really blessed with a great athletic ability. I could throw a football really well. I was a 3-year starting quarterback for my high school team, my 5A team, and I got a scholarship to play football at the University of North Texas. But football, for most people, comes to an end at some point, and mine came to an end in 1996 against Texas A&M. I separated my shoulder, got hurt, and I came up to like what I really like to call a fork in the road in life. And then at that fork in the road, that precipice where football is gone from my life, you know, I've got what I like to call an existential vacuum. Not my word. That was a term I picked up from Viktor Frankl, reading a lot of books. I read a lot of books in prison. But Viktor Frankl talked about the existential vacuum where your existence can be wrapped up in this thing. And so when I got up to this fork in the road, I started putting in a lot of chemicals, the hardcore stuff now, to change the way I felt. I did not like who I was, and substance abuse became a permanence on my life. And why
didn't you like who you were?
Because my value systems were wrong. I put so much value on being a college football quarterback, for one thing, which is, I mean, it's silly when I look at it through my eyes now, but that's what I put my value in as a person. I didn't have, you know, Rhett, I really believe that addicts, you talked about addiction, and I was glad to hear you talk about that, because substance abuse addiction affects everybody in this country, in the United States. Yeah, whether you're the addict going through it, the family member, because the family members get it the worst, or you're a victim of a crime an addict commits against you, or you're just a taxpayer here in America paying into an overburdened criminal justice system that has no idea how to handle the disease of addiction. Addiction affects us all. But when you're in your addiction, and I found this out because I got into recovery when I was in prison, but when you're in your addiction, you're really kind of a selfish, very immature person. And I relate it back to this term called arrested development. So you asked about my value system. Why would I feel that way? I think that my emotional maturity was so stunted at an early age. I think whenever I look back on it, probably stuck around 13 or 14 until I got into prison and started maturing both emotionally and spiritually once I was in that environment and started growing. But I owe to a program of recovery. I have a 12-step program of recovery that I'm a part of, and I work actively. And I think every addict needs some kind of program of recovery.
Right. Sorry, I interrupted you, but I was fascinated by the value, because I think about that. You know, how do you you had it all. You had perfect sort of existence, and although football had ended, everything was still seemingly going for you, right? You had everything on the outside was positive.
Sure. I mean, on the outside, it looked healthy. It looked normal. I graduated college in 1999. My family's intact. I'm making decent money. I worked in Congress. After that, I worked for a guy running for president of the United States. Dick Gephardt was running for president in 2004.
Yeah.
Raised money for him all over the country. And when he dropped out of the race in 2004, I moved back to Dallas, Texas, to train to be a stockbroker for one of the biggest Wall Street banks in the world, UBS, United Bank of Switzerland. And, there was nothing to give a hint to the fact that this guy in 2004 that starts working for UBS 4 years later would be taken down by a Dallas SWAT team. And 1 year after that would be sentenced to life in prison. There's just nothing to lay out the scene. But the big X factor in all of this that happened in 2004, I was asleep at work one day at UBS, and one of the other brokers comes up and he sees me sleeping. And he freaks out on me. He's like, Damon, man, wake up. You can't sleep as a broker, man. The markets are open. You're messing with people's money. He said, come on down to the parking garage. I got someone's going to pick you up. So Rhett, I mean, I get up and we go down to the parking garage. I think we're going to do some cocaine because that's really what I'm into at the time. And we get in his car and he hands me this glass pipe with these little crystal rocks in it. And I freak out on the guy. I'm like, man, well, what is that? And he said, hey, Damon, relax, man. He said, it's crystal meth. He said, you'll love this stuff. And Rhett, truer words have never been spoken, man. I mean, I fell in love with that drug that day. And I became instantly hooked, just like that. And it took no time for everything to fall apart. I mean, my job was first, my car, my savings account, my family, my home, everything. I lost everything. I went from working on Wall Street to living on the streets, the streets of Dallas, sleeping on park benches, sleeping in cars, living in dope houses. And, we sat around these dope houses and got high and we committed crimes to pay for our addiction. I mean, I remember I started breaking into cars. I started breaking into storage units, and eventually I'm breaking into people's homes. And a home burglary, Rhett, I mean, any of your listeners out there that have ever been the victim of a home invasion or burglary, they know what I'm talking about, man. I didn't just take people's property. I stole people's sense of security. And I don't know if they ever get that back. But July 30th, 2008 was a day that I'll never forget because I was in this little apartment in Dallas, and I'm sitting there with my meth dealer sitting next to me, and I'm telling him that, man, his name was Tex. I said, hey, Tex, I think the end is near. I think the cops are going to come get me pretty soon. You see, 10 days before this guy I'd been doing all these burglaries with, this guy named Dustin, had been picked up by the Dallas Police Department. And just as I'm telling him that, man, a window shatters off to my right, and this stun grenade is tumbling across my floor. And I get up and get over this grenade, and bam, blows up right in my face. Bright white light, loud noise. And I'm blown back on the couch. And when I came to, when I can see and hear again, there's a cop in full SWAT riot gear. And he's got his boot on my chest, and the barrel of a machine gun is digging in my eye socket. And these cops are screaming at me, telling me don't move. And I'm like, man, don't worry, And that was the day, July 30th, 2008, that the Uptown burglaries came to an end, and the day I got arrested, or as I like to tell people everywhere I go, the day I was rescued. I got out of a situation I couldn't get myself out of, right? And that was the beginning of an incarceration process. I had no idea how long it would last, but it was 7 years and 3 months before I saw my freedom again. And I went on a journey that can best be described as all-encompassing, horrifying, mind-boggling, but very spiritual too inside that prison.
I can't imagine, honestly. Like I just had, I don't think unless you've experienced that, you can understand that and how frightening that must be. What was your family through this whole thing? What was their reaction and I mean, that's devastating for a father and a mother and a family. I mean, how did they support you through this?
That's a great question, Rhett. I mean, it's spot on too, because, in The Change Agent, the book deals with this a lot. It's one of the things, it's interesting. The Change Agent, they're going to be making it into a movie, a Netflix series. And I was in Hollywood last week talking to Eric Tannenbaum, who's the guy from Lionsgate Film and the screenwriter, and that was there. And we're talking about the layout of The Change Agent. They're like, man, whoever plays your mother has to be like a Meryl Streep type character, because my mother really kept it together for the whole family. She was the glue. She still is the glue that holds us all together. But my parents, I mean, they went through hell. I've never seen my dad cry, but when I called home from that jail cell after I first got arrested, I heard my dad cry. And he was screaming and crying on the phone. He sounded like a wounded animal, and Damon, how did we go so wrong? How we mess up so bad? What could we have done different? Now he's crying and I'm crying. And so my mom snatched the phone out of my dad's hand and she said, baby, listen, your dad can't talk right now. My mom's a nurse, by the way, right? So she's used to traumatic situations. And so, right. So my mom starts having a conversation with me about how they love me unconditionally, about how, she wants me to get on God's back, like in Footprints in the Sand, this little prayer plaque that my mom had on the wall when I was a kid growing up. And just that they love me and that, don't forget that. And so county jail was, it was a time, because I'm still an addict and I I would love to get the drugs in county jail, but I don't have any means to do it. So in place of that, I'm sitting there waiting for my day in court. And about 10 months later, I got my day in court. And, Rhett, when I went to trial, the evidence of my guilt was so overwhelming. It was a 6-day trial in the state of Texas. My family's there. My mom and my dad, my little brother. My older brother, he lives in D.C., so he's not there at the time. But they listened to testimony just like the jury did for 6 days. And at the end of 6 days, Rhett, a jury of my peers, 12 men and women from Dallas County, deliberated for 10 minutes on my sentence. 10 minutes, man. I don't know how much Law and Order you watch, but if a jury's going for 10 minutes,
that's not good.
No, not at all. And I walked back into the courtroom, and the judge who had the spot, this is where the change agent starts. It starts off on March 18th, 2009. It was the day I was sentenced to life in prison. 65 years is life. And, the judge, he hadn't smiled the whole time. He's grinning from ear to ear. And, Damon Joseph West, you are hereby sentenced to 65 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. And my mother gasped on the front row. She's like, just a sound only a mother can make. Like, like her son just got a life sentence in prison. And it was gut wrenching. It was like being kicked in the chest. I've heard my parents describe it as feeling like this emptiness, this complete loss inside them. And I remember thinking, man, I caused that. My poor parents. I put them through hell, and the journey was just beginning, Rhett.
I can't imagine. I mean, to me, the hell of the 6 days listening to that, right, must have just been gut wrenching. I can't imagine. And
here's the deal, too. So I was living in Dallas, and Dallas is 6 hours away from Port Arthur. Texas is a big state. Right. Mm-hmm. So they didn't have to witness whenever I was in my addiction, they weren't there to witness that. That might be a saving grace throughout the whole story, is they didn't see the physical and mental deterioration, spiritual deterioration of their son. It wasn't happening in front of them, and I wasn't ever around them. So they didn't have to witness that. But like you said, they're there for 6 days at trial, and they're seeing witness after witness and victim after victim. And it was a parade of co-conspirators being put on trial, as witnesses against me. It was organized crime is what I got convicted of. And so they were floored. In fact, after I got sentenced, they threw me in this little holding room right off to the side of the courtroom, and they told me to wait there. And my parents came in about 5 minutes later. They gave my parents one last visit with me before I go to prison. There's a bulletproof glass right in between us. So my dad walks in first, man. He's stoic. He's in stunned disbelief. He just saw his son, with all this promise in life, get a life sentence in prison. So my mom does all the talking. And she says, the first thing she says, Rhett, she said, baby, debts in life demand to be paid. And she said, you just got hit with one heck of a bill from the state of Texas. She said, but you owe that debt to society. And we know this, man, not just from a personal perspective, from business. If you owe a debt, you'll pay it. You have to pay your debts. She said, you owe your debt to society, Damon. She said, you did the things they said you did in that courtroom, so you have to pay that debt. She said, but you owe your father and I a debt too. She said, Damon, we gave you all the opportunity, love, and support to be anything in this life, and this is what you chose. She said, that won't work. She said, we raised you in Port Arthur, Texas, a giant melting pot of a city. And Rhett, Port Arthur is a predominantly African-American town. It's a blue-collar town, refinery town. So I was raised around all the races, everybody, And so she said, we raised you in Port Arthur, Texas, a giant melting pot of a city, gave you a great moral compass, which you chose to not use. So here's the debt you're going to pay to us. When you go to prison, you will not get one of these white hate groups, one of these Aryan Brotherhood type gangs, because you're scared because you're the minority in there. She said, you were never raised to see race, and you will not start today. She said, you will not get any tattoos while you're in prison. And Rhett, I always show people my sleeves, man, when I go talk. Like, I spent almost 10 years in prison, man, in maximum security, highest level security prison there is in Texas. And these guys want to tattoo every inch of your body in this place. These guys were like, man, damn it, Wes, let me put a tattoo on you. And I tell them every time, man, I can't. My mom said no, So I really did, seriously. So my mom said no gangs and no tattoos. She said, Damon, you come back as the man we raised, or don't come back at all. And that's really, my mom and I have never had a conversation like that. I don't think most mothers ever have a conversation with their children. That's tough.
She's a force of nature, man. You're absolutely right. That deserves a Meryl Streep character.
Oh, yeah. She's the star of the book, The Change Agent. The Change Agent is really big. it's a story about addiction. It's a story about life. It's a story about how a family has to deal with this addict. It's about the failures. But there's stories in there that I talk about that happened in my addiction. The biggest failures of my life. One of them was with my grandmother that is sent to live with me after Hurricane Rita destroys my parents' house. And I'm just incapable of taking care of myself, much less another human being. The biggest failure of my life was that story. And no one would know that unless I told the story. And even my parents were like, are you sure you want to put that story in the book? And the publisher was like, hey, man, this is a really personal story. I'm like, yes, but what better way to illustrate how horrible and ugly addiction is than to tell you my biggest failures and paint that picture for you. But it also makes the turnaround that much bigger too, man, because people love redemption stories, right? They love the story about the guy that gets his butt kicked for 12 rounds all over the mat and gets up in the last second and wins, and that, they love the Rocky type. And that's what my life has been. But it took a severe mindset shift. That first chapter that we're talking about, it happens on May 18th, 2009. That's called rock bottom, because as an addict, that's my rock bottom moment. I realized that day that something has to change, and that something is me.
Are you surprised that people want to hear this story?
No, I'm not surprised that people want to hear the story, Rhett. And there are a few reasons about that. One is, like I told you, the redemption type story. People love that. But two, I think people are always searching for that motivation or that spark, or how did someone do this? And you look at a story about a guy that, if you look at me, it's incongruent with a guy that can say, I start the story out all the time with talking about sitting there smoking meth on the couch with my meth dealer, and everybody's eyes in the room with these corporations I'm going to are like, whoa, but that gets everybody's attention. And now they're hooked. And so you think about a guy that survived a maximum security penitentiary, and you don't see the tattoos, you don't see any of the physical scars, but people want to know that that's possible, and they want to know how you did it. More importantly, they want to know, okay, if you did all this, and it's obvious you did, we can't deny what we can see. How did you do it? People ask me all the time, Rhett, how did you do it? And the answer, first of all, there's a lot of things that I think, God's opened a lot of doors for me. And it's not like I'm this, superhuman human being. I tell people all the time, especially in recovery, that, no one's going to cure you of these things you have wrong, especially if you're an addict. You don't ever get cured if you're an addict. You get well, but you get better, but you never get well. You're not going to be cured of your addiction. But God, whatever you believe God is, will put people in your life. And it's not like some kind of miracle just comes down out of the sky, but there's going to be people on the path in life that you meet that give you these clues to turn it around. And one of those people was a guy in this story. And it was after I got sentenced to life in prison, and I'm walking around Dallas County Jail. And this is going to answer your question a little bit more about why people want to hear the story. So I'm going around Dallas County Jail, and I'm asking these guys that have been to prison before, hey, man, how am I going to survive this? I just got hit with life. And every guy, Rhett, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, telling me the same thing. You have to get into a gang. You're 33 years old. You're gang recruiting age. You're going to the worst part of the Texas prison system where everybody's got a life sentence. There's no way you can do it without getting to a gang, man. Make your life easy, get into a gang. But there was this one guy, this older African-American man named Mr. Jackson. And Mr. Jackson was in his 60s. He was he's what you would call a seasoned convict. He'd been to prison 4 or 5 times, repeat offender. But he's a real positive guy, Rhett. He was always smiling and just lighting up the room inside that pod. And he would always come have coffee with me in the morning. We'd always talk every morning. So Mr. Jackson's talking to me one morning, and he says, Wes, I've been watching how you're dealing with these knuckleheads, these dummies, talk about you got to get into a gang. He said, man, don't listen to them. He said, but you need to understand some things about prison. He said, the first thing you need to understand is that prison is all about race. He said, race runs the entire institution. He said, that's the way all the inmates want it. So they want you to get in your own racial group with your own like people and stay in your group. He said, so you want to go against that. Your parents have talked to you about that. You're not going to get into that. He said, that's fine. People do that. But what you need to understand is that where you're going, that part of prison that you're going to, it's going to be the hardest part. And so when you walk in, the white gangs have the first dibs on you. He said the Aryan Brotherhood, the Aryan Circle, the White Knights, the Woods, you have to fight all of them, and you have to survive this. And then he said, if you survive that and you don't give in to their ideology of hate, out of fear, because Rhett, we do a lot of things in life out of fear. And this is another ingredient of why people want to hear this story is because, I try to reveal to them that fear is in your head. You give fear life. And it's like the boogeyman or the monster when you were a kid that was in your closet or under your bed. You never found him because he or she didn't exist. It was in your head. Most fears are that way too. Some fears are real, Rhett, but I mean, for most part, we give fears life and we let them run free in our head, and they can make us make very poor decisions which have tremendous consequences. And he's telling me, don't join a gang out of fear. Don't do that. And he said, but if you survive their onslaught, the white gangs, then the black gangs are coming at you. The Crips and the Bloods, the Gangster Disciples, the Mandingo Warriors. He said, you're fighting them all. He said, but if you survive all that, you'll earn the right to walk alone. And that's when he gave me this lesson in life. He said, you don't have to win all your fights, but you have to fight all. You must win. You don't have to win all your fights, but you have to fight all your fights. And that's a lesson in life, right? We're going to get knocked down in life, whether it's business, personal, things are going to happen in the course of a human life that knock us down to the mat, but we have to get back up and keep going. You cannot just lay down there and take it. And I think that so many people get stuck into a rut. I tell people all the time, Rhett, I meet more people out here that are locked up than I ever did when I was in prison. More people are in prison by their thoughts and by their things than by steel bars and barbed wire and concrete, right?
Yeah.
So Mr. Jackson is telling me this story, and he's telling me, he's like, let me give you an analogy. Let me help you out. He said, I want you to imagine prison as a pot of boiling water. He said, anything we put in that pot of boiling water is going to be changed by the heat and the pressure inside that pot. He said, I want to put 3 things in that pot of boiling water and watch how they change. A carrot, an egg, and a coffee bean.
Coffee bean.
So he said, first things first. He said, if I put a carrot into a pot of boiling water, he said, what happens to the carrot in prison? And I said, well, it turns soft. He said, that's right. He said, the carrot turned soft. He said, the water, prison, turned that carrot soft. He went in hard, but, he got beat, he got robbed, he may have gotten raped, and he may have gotten killed. He said, you do not want to be the carrot in prison. He said, what about the egg? I'm catching on here. So a little bit more confidently, I said, an egg turns hard, like a hard-boiled egg, Mr. Jackson. And he said, that's right. He said, the egg goes in there with that shell that protects it. He said, but inside his soft liquid core, his heart becomes hardened. He said, if your heart becomes hardened, you're incapable of giving and receiving love. And he said, if you're incapable of giving and receiving love, you have become institutionalized, and you do not come back as someone your parents recognize because your eggshell has swastikas tattooed all over it now. And he said, what about the coffee bean? And I didn't know, Rhett. I didn't have a clue about a coffee bean in a pot of boiling water. And he laughed at me, and he said, Wes, for a college boy, you're not too smart. He said, if I put a coffee bean into that pot of boiling water, he said, now you got to change the name of the water to coffee. He said the coffee bean, the smallest of these 3 things, had the power to change the entire atmosphere inside that pot. He said, everybody in life puts out energy, negative or positive. He said, whatever kind of energy you put out, you will attract back. He's explaining the law of attraction. He said, so if you want to walk around prison with a frown on your face, you want to look hard. He said, really, you're going to attract that same kind of hard inmate. It can be a very dangerous, even deadly endeavor on the life sentence building. He said, but Damon, if you walk around that prison with a smile on your face and you let those guys know, man, they're not getting to you, no matter what they do, they can't get to you. He said, you'll change that prison from the inside out. And he said, the best part about it is the other coffee beans in prison, the other positive inmates will find you because of your energy. And the last thing Mr. Jackson told me before I got shipped to prison in August of 2009 was go out there and go be a coffee bean.
I love it. I love it. How'd that go in prison?
Man, well, prison was a baptism by fire, man. It was tough, Rhett. I mean, it was, and I detail in the book The Change Agent. So the first couple of months was brutal. I got in fight. I tell people all the time that I probably got in 3 dozen fights the whole time from county jail to the penitentiary and lost 75% of them. Physically lost. I mean, that's a lot of times to get your butt kicked. But I kept getting back up, and eventually, the way it is in my mind, I won because I showed up. If you keep showing up every day, you have a chance to win. And if you keep showing up, you build that confidence in yourself. And that's another, these different elements of the story, why people want to hear it. Because a little bitty guy like me goes in there, a little white guy like me, and Rhett, no one liked me at first. I mean, I didn't get, the whites didn't like me, the blacks didn't like me, the Hispanic, no one liked me, Rhett. I went in there, I look and I sound like the man that put them away. The institution itself is what they picture in me, man. I'm a middle class, clean cut white guy. I speak differently than everybody else. I look differently. My mannerisms are out of place in there. And I look like the man, and everybody teed off on me at first, Rhett. But, after a couple months, I earned the right to exist in there. I mean, that's really all I was hoping for. But it all culminated after 2 months in there. I'm coming off the rec yard one day, and this guy tells me that this guy's going to rape me in the shower. And so he gives me a knife, and I give him the knife back because I've never fought with a knife before. And I was like, there's got to be another weapon, another way. I've never fought with a knife. His name is Carlos. I'm like, he's my cellmate. I'm like, Carlos, give me another weapon, man. This is prison. Help me out here. So we go up to our cell, and in Texas prisons, there's no air conditioning. I mean, it's hot, man. It's hot, man. It's brutally hot. So we have these little bitty fans that, you can buy off the commissary. And I would never accuse one of these fans of really keeping you too cool, but I mean, they help you survive. So he takes the fan apart, cuts the fan motor out. It's about a 5-pound motor, and he puts it in this little mesh commissary bag. And he tells me how to wait in the shower and ambush this guy when he comes in with his knife trying to rape me. And he gives me the instructions to kill this guy. He said, you got to kill him. He said, but you'll never leave this place alive. In fact, the name of that chapter in my book is called You'll Never Leave This Place Alive. And suffice to say, I got the jump on the guy that day, Rhett, and I didn't kill him, but not for a lack of trying. I mean, I tried to bash his head in with his fan motor when he's coming to rape me. But I got the jump on him. He didn't get me. I got him. He survived. And everybody just gave me a wide berth at that point. They left me alone because they saw that I could speak the only language everybody speaks in prison, which is violence. And either in maximum security prison, either you speak violence or someone speaks it to you, but you become fluent in the language of violence. This is also the reason whenever I asked Mr. Jackson about the coffee bean story, I asked him when he told me the analogy, I said, well, Mr. Jackson, what do you find more of in prison? And he said, eggs. He said, the egg is a natural evolution of a human being inside the environment you're about to go to. He said, we are not made as humans to withstand what you're about to go through. He was right, Rhett, because at the end of 2 months when the fighting was over, I had become the egg. And I didn't want to be the egg, but it's just it's so compounding when you're in that environment. It's an evil, dark place. And I didn't want to be the egg, Rhett. I didn't want to, but it was taken off. And when Mr. Jackson explained it to me about the power being inside me to change, I had to dig deep into that, man. I had to dig deep and I had to buy into that. But the thing about it, too, is I was a little upset with Mr. Jackson because Mr. Jackson didn't give me an instruction booklet, on how to become a coffee bean. Didn't give me a how-to guide. But I figured it out, man. I figured it out, man. So I did a lot of reading while I was in there. And I read everything I could. I read a book every other day. And it's probably where I learned how to write. I mean, the publisher was surprised about my skills as a writer. And so was I, actually. I mean, because they didn't use a ghostwriter or anything. But I read a book every other day. I read history. I read fiction. I read nonfiction novels, the history of world religions. There's 5 major religions in the history of the world. I mean, there's Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And at the core of these 5 major religions, 95% of the world believes in one of these 5, right? And at the core of all 5 of these religions, if you read their spiritual texts, the Bhagavad Gita, the Torah, the Quran, the Bible, they all have these 4 spiritual principles underlining them all. And they're also in the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And those 4 spiritual principles are unselfish, honest, pure, and loving.
Right.
So unselfish, honest, pure, and loving. This becomes the first piece of my puzzle to turn it around in there. So I've got a matrix basically to plug all my decisions into in prison and beyond. I do it to this day. And I stumble and I fall. I don't always do it right. And I'm a human being. But I have to ask myself, is Damon, what you're about to do, is it unselfish? Is it honest? Is it pure? Is it loving? And if it's not, I need to reconsider my choices. But the thing I had to do each day, Rhett, inside that prison, and I have to even do now, but in that prison, I have to start with a mindset change every day. And every day I would remind myself that, Damon, prison is not a punishment. Prison is your opportunity to work on yourself 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and be the best human being that you can be. And when I attacked prison as an opportunity instead of a punishment, it changed the way I felt. And it changed the way I looked. And I found out of all these different things, there was about 5 ways of becoming a coffee bean. And that's the basis. I'll get to the book that Jon and I wrote about the coffee bean, but when I'm living in there, the first thing about being a coffee bean is your body language. Your body language affects everybody around you. You either infect people or you affect people around you, right? And so I didn't want to infect anybody with some negativity. So I found that if I smiled, just like Jackson said, if I smiled everywhere I went, I could change some of the energy in the room. And the energy started changing everywhere I would go because this positivity would follow me around. And in a room full of positive people, negative people do one of two things, Rhett. They either get with the program and become positive too, because that's what happens a lot of time. People have an inherent need to want to belong and be loved. That's a basic human desire you need. But truly negative people, these are your employees that hang around by the water cooler. They start stuff. They start gossip. They're very divisive. They're the ones that never give the program. Truly negative people in a room full of positive people, they get out of the room. They leave. They quit. They quit their jobs. They go somewhere else where they can sow their discord. And that's what one of the main things I talk about to companies when I go speak all the time is you have to create a culture of positivity. And that was what I was doing inside prison, is creating a culture of positivity inside of a maximum security prison. So this is not, you think your office is a place to work? Man, try going to work every day at the Mark Stiles unit. Man, it's tough, but it can be done, right? And that's what I do. I go around and I share that message, and I talk about the different ways. The second way of becoming a coffee bean was, going to work out every day. I'd make myself work out. Days I don't feel like getting out of my bunk, I got to get out of my bunk, but I got to work out in 3 areas. I'm not talking about like being a bodybuilder. I'm talking about spiritually, mentally, and physically, getting in shape every day. And this is important because a spiritual workout, well, I give people an example of my spiritual workout. At the end of each day, I talk to God, what I believe God is, because I don't ever push a religious agenda on anybody. That's your choice to believe or not believe is entirely up to you. But I talk to what I call God, and I say, God, hey, look, how was I today? Was I a good person? Do I owe someone an apology? Did I have any resentments? What did I do to put back in the stream of life today? And the biggest question I have to ask God is, do I owe someone forgiveness? And that forgiveness thing, we forget about that. We always want to be forgiven for the things we do, but it's contingent upon us forgiving other people. Because here's what happens to people a lot of times, Rhett, is they hold on to these resentments and they get mad at people, and that hate corrodes you from the inside out. Hate corrodes the containers contained in. I tell people all the time, a resentment is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies, right? So you got to let go, get out of the house. That's a spiritual workout to get past that. And that's a daily thing. And mentally working out means what kind of books do you read? What kind of videos do you watch? What kind of websites do you go to? What do you spend your free time? Are you on social media all the time? What are you doing with yourself? Because, man, you are what you eat, right? That's not just about food. That's about what do you digest?
Yeah.
You read all these books, these positive books. I looked at your list for the top 20, 2020, and I started reading those because I want to put the right things, Yeah, I saw the company I was in. I was like, wow, I've got to get some of that too. But that's the thing, spiritually, mentally, and physically, we've got to take care of ourselves. We get one body, and it can be as easy as eating the right foods. Not everybody has time to get out and exercise a lot, but, take the stairs instead of the escalator sometimes. Take the stairs instead of the elevator sometimes. Find ways to take care of yourself. And the third rule about being a coffee bean, and Rhett, if I'm talking too much, just stop me at any time.
All right, this is great. It's fantastic. No, don't stop.
So the third rule about being a coffee bean is knowing what the secret to life was. The secret to life, it was elusive to me all my life, like I told you before, because I was a very selfish person and a very immature person. But when I got into prison, I got into recovery, and I got around the chapel and the Mark Stiles unit where I did my time, I met a lot of these men. And these men that I would meet in there that came in and they would minister to us, there was a particular guy that was involved in prison ministry. This guy's name is Joe Tatoris. Now, Joe Tatoris, this is a great story for you, Rhett. Joe Tatoris graduated Texas A&M in 1970, and he moved back to Beaumont, Texas, where we live in Beaumont, the southeast Texas part.
That's right.
He moved back to Beaumont, and in 1976, he started a little sandwich shop. And his little sandwich shop had 4 employees in one store. Today, Jason's Deli has over 300 restaurants in over 32 states and has 12,000 employees at Jason's Deli, right?
That's right.
Joe Tatoris, who passed away in August of this past year, bless him. But Joe Tatoris is a true servant leader. And he taught me that the secret to life is called servant leadership. The secret to life is about what can you do for other people? How can you help other people achieve their goals in life? And he told me the story about Jason's Deli in the early 90s. He said, we were expanding. They were getting their first franchises out, I think in Arizona, he said. But he wasn't happy. because he was doing what they tell you in business school to do all the time: go out and chase money. So the almighty dollar was everything he would. And he said, that's how you run a business. That's how you thought you ran a business. But in 1995, he was at a symposium, and David Glass was the speaker. David Glass was Sam Walton's handpicked successor at Walmart. He was the first CEO of Walmart. And David Glass gave a speech that day, and he used the term servant leadership, and it blew Joe away. Because Joe, at this point in his life, he thought a servant was someone that carried the towel, that did menial tasks. They swept the floor. And the leader was the one at the top and just watched everybody do, his bidding. And that's when he realized he had it all wrong. He's supposed to be doing more for his employees. He's supposed to be helping them raise themselves up to a different station in life and find ways to make their lives better. And that's what he did. He started giving better benefits. The employees had the best of everything. And, he said that people came to Jason's Deli and they came to stay. And Rhett, I'll go all over the country when I'm traveling around speaking. If they have a Jason's Deli in that town, I'll try to make my way there. To pay homage to Joe, I like the food, but I love finding the general manager, the manager, and into these Jason's Deli, and I'll say, hey, man, how long have you been here? Or a man or a woman, and they're like 18 years, 25 years, 35 years. They go there. That's unheard of in the fast food business, right?
That's crazy.
And people, Joe would just crack up. He said, man, Damon, all my other CEO buddies will ask me, Joe, where are you finding your people? He said, the same place you're finding yours. It's what happens when they get on the inside is what's different, So the secret to life I learned in prison from these men like Joe Torres that would come minister to us on the inside. They would leave their jobs, their homes, their lives, their families, their careers for 4 days and spend it with us, the cursed, the wicked, the sinners, the incarcerated. Man, they made us feel loved and wanted, and they helped bring us hope. And that was the thing, man, to have that piece of hope, and that's servant leadership. And so I applied that when I was in prison. I had a bachelor's degree when I was in prison, so I couldn't take any of the classes at the schoolhouse. But they let me go down there and teach guys how to read, how to write, and tutor people. I mean, you're teaching a guy in his 50s how to read a book, man, a children's book. That's empowering to that person. That helps them become something else. I would teach guys how to get ready for the GED test. So one day when they got out, they'd have a chance to do and provide better for their families. And it was a tremendous feeling that I got when I got involved in servant leadership and got outside myself. And so that's one of the core tenets. That's one of the main things. When I go in and talk to a company, a team, or organization, servant leadership, I'm pounding this into their heads because every great organization operates under some auspice of servant leadership. You look at all the great ones. So the fourth rule about being a coffee bean is knowing what you do and do not control. This took me a long time, Rhett, and it took me getting into recovery to figure out there's 4 things that you control in life. And there's only 4, and they're all between your ears, man. It's inside you. Right. You control what you think, what you feel, what you say, and most importantly, everybody's going to see what you do. So if I believe that what I think, say, feel, and do are really the 4 things I control, and everything else is controlled by an outside force that I call God, then if I get out of God's way and I focus on those 4 things, my life can take off in the fast lane, and it did. Man, the inmates took notice, the guards took notice, the parole board took notice. So they came to see me on November 16th, 2015. And the lady from parole was reading my parole package. She's reading my file. And she's like, Mr. West, we don't see a lot of guys come through like you in the state prison system. And you had everything. You were a stockbroker. You worked for government for president. You were in Congress, a quarterback. And then you get hooked on meth and you become a criminal and you make all these victims and you get hit with a life sentence. She said, you got way too much time for your crime. She said, but then you come to this prison and you transform yourself and the world around you. She said, I have one question for you. She said, if you could be remembered for being anything in this life, give it to me in one word, go. And Rhett, because I was a coffee bean and because I understood all the ingredients I had talked to you about just now, I had her answer for her just like that. And I fired it right back. I said, useful. I just want to be useful. I said, I can be useful out here. I can be useful in this prison, as you've seen it so far, or I can be useful out there going to try to find those coffee beans. And she said, we're going to give you one shot. We're going to let you go. 7 years and 3 months into this life sentence. Said, we're going to let you go. But if you come back in handcuffs anywhere between now and 2073, we will keep you until 2073. Rhett, I'm on parole the rest of my life. I mean, they've got a short leash on me. I tell people all the time, anytime I travel outside the state of Texas, I got to take a urinalysis before I leave. And within 24 hours of getting back to Texas, I got to take another urinalysis for the rest of my life. But I'm free. I have a chance. And I have a chance to go out there. And when I was out in the world and the second day I was out of prison, I got this job at one of the most prestigious law firms in Texas, Provost Humphrey Law Firm in Beaumont. I did some legal work in prison. It's in the book, The Change Agent. I talk about it. This guy that owns the firm, Walter Humphrey, when I was in prison, he said, man, you put together a hell of a writ for a guy that's never been to law school. When you get out of prison, if you get out of prison, come see me. I got a job for you. And so the second day I was out of prison, I went to see Mr. Humphrey and I said, hey, man, I'm out. I need a job. They hired me just like that, man. I went to work for a huge, prestigious firm, instant validity for a guy that needed a lot of validity. Eventually, I started speaking, and then eventually I got my big break. You know, I tell people all the time this story is that the only question you know the answer to, Rhett, is the one you do not ask. All right? That's a guaranteed no. So we're talking about January 2017. I've been out of prison 14 months, and I want to get into the college football speaking circuit. You know, but it's tough. I played football back in the 90s. No one knows who I was. I've been in prison. No one really wants to talk to me about it. And it's a very tight-knit group, these college football coaches, small fraternity. There's only 100 and something of them.
Right.
So a buddy of mine that's in the media in Houston, in January of 17, he says, hey, man, I've got you a press credential tonight for the Bear Bryant Coaching Awards. It's at the Toyota Center in Houston. And the Bear Bryant Award is given every year to the College Football Coach of the Year. He said, Damon, the best coaches in the country, there's going to be 8 of them in this room. He said, man, I'll get you in and you're on your own. And he said, if you get caught with the press pass, by the way, you know, I didn't do it. Don't snitch me out. So Rhett, I went home after work and I threw on my best hand-me-down suit. I had 2 suits at the time because they were both given to me when I got out of prison. And all my clothes. In fact, I still wear some of those clothes, you know, stuff that people gave to me and donated to me. I threw on my best hand-me-down suit. I got cleaned up. I even made these little rinky-dink business cards just for the event. And I drove the 90 miles to Houston. I get to the Toyota Center, and I get to see all these coaches. And I hit the ground running. Rhett, I'm talking to USC, Penn State, you know, Wisconsin. All the major coaches are there. Every one of them is slamming the door in my face. No. Or, yeah, great story. Don't call us. We'll call you. Right. I'm 7 to 8 coaches down. And I'm in the corner of the Toyota Center, licking my wounds, feeling sorry for myself. 7 of the 8 coaches, and Rhett, the thought comes to my head, man, just go home, Damon. Don't even worry about that last coach. Just go home, man. All I want to do is go home. But then I thought, dude, what kind of motivational speaker would you be if you just quit before you finish with the 8th coach? And right. You survived prison. You survived way worse than this. You're not leaving until you talk to that coach. He's going to have to tell you no himself. So, Rhett, I watched and I waited and I stalked Dabo Swinney and I jumped on him. And to this day, Dabo will tell you that I put 10 minutes of conversation into 1 minute. My elevator pitch was flowing, man. It was like getting a drink of water out of a fire hydrant.
That's right.
And so at the end of a minute, he says, hey, great, that's great, Damon. You got a card on you? So I give him my little card. And he says, all right, we'll be in touch. And I'm like, oh, man, another miss, right? So I go home, I get in my car, I drive home, but I feel good, right? I left it all on the field. I tried. I went 0 for 8. Man, I talked to all 8 of them.
All good, right?
4 months later, I'm at work at that law firm, and I get an email from the director of football operations at Clemson University. And he says, hey, Coach Swinney met you at an award show in Houston. Said he'd love to have you come talk to your team. Do you have August 1st available? And I'm like, dude, do I have August 1st available? I don't have anything going on the first of any month. So I went to speak to Clemson on August 1st of 2017, Rhett. And I know you're a Gamecock fan. But this was magic. This is magical. I got done speaking, and Dabo comes up to me after the presentation. He goes, Damon, that's the most amazing story I've ever heard. He said, I've never seen my guys respond to a speaker like that. They had a Q&A afterwards. They had to shut after 20 minutes. They had to shut it down to get the next meeting. And he said, man, have you been to Alabama yet? And I kind of laughed at him because, like, Dabo, man, you know how hard it was to get in this room? He said, man, He said, yeah. He said, we'll see about that. He said, I just text Nick Saban from the back of the room, let him know what I was witnessing. And Rhett, when I landed in Houston the next morning, I had a voicemail and a text message from the director of football operations at University of Alabama that said, hey, we'll see you in Tuscaloosa in 3 weeks. You're on. I mean, so Dabo kicked that door open. You know, a year later, after that, in August of 18, I'm at my desk at work. The other time I'm at my desk at the law firm, and I get a phone call. And the other end of the phone is Jon Gordon. Now, Rhett, I'm a motivational speaker. I'm a very small-time motivational speaker, and I'm going to be an author at some point. You know, I've got my manuscript almost done in August of 18. But I know who Jon Gordon is, but how the hell does he know who I am, man? And so I asked him, all right, sure, if this is Jon Gordon, how do you know, how'd you get my number, dude? He said, man, Dabo Swinney. He said, Dabo Swinney can't quit talking about you and that coffee bean story. And he's like, Damon, man, let's write a book. Let's get this message. This coffee bean message needs to be spread all over the world, and we can do it, man. Write a book with me. And at first, Fred, I told Jon, I was like, man, Jon, I am flattered, man. I'm blown away, but you're Jon Gordon, man. Jon sold 4 million books. I mean, Jon, go write the book yourself. You're the energy bus guy. Go write the book. Yes. And Jon's like, no, Damon, wait, stop. He said, man, God told me to call you. This is the way we have to do this together, Damon. He said, it only works if we do this together. Write this book with me, please. Yeah. And so I did the book with Jon, and we did the book together. It became a Wall Street Journal bestseller. You know, it came out in July of last year, became a bestseller. But Rhett, the coolest thing is that we get emails from the publisher every month. Kind of tells us where the book is going and the places it's going. And that book, the rights have been sold now in China, in France, in Vietnam, in Korea, Germany, Saudi Arabia. The book is in Chinese, man. It's in French. It's in Vietnamese. It's in Arabic. You know, this coffee bean message is literally getting all over the world. And I believe the coffee bean message is something that every team, organization, or group needs in their lives, because that's what you really want. You want that message of positivity. Because the fifth rule about being a coffee bean is the one that I learned when I was out of prison, and I've been out living this life. You know, I really learned fully what the fifth rule about being a coffee bean was. And that was in, you know, I picked it up along the way when I started dating this woman named Kendall Romero, because Kendall accepted me for all my faults and all my flaws. And I just really didn't know if that would be possible. You know, Rhett, when I go into prisons now, these guys that I talk to in these prisons, they'll come up and they're like, man, you got a fascinating life, but I want to know how you did that, man. How did you find somebody that would love you after all you've done? And because everybody in prison has that same fear. No one will ever love them again, you know? But on May 18th, 2019, 10 years to the day that I got sentenced to life in prison, I got married. I got married to Kendall, and you know, I became her husband and a stepfather to her daughter. Yep. And those relationships in life are what it's really all about, because the fifth rule about being a coffee bean is knowing that your past does not define you. You know, your past wins don't define you. Your past losses don't define you. Your past is your lesson, and it's made for us to learn from and to teach others with, and to learn from other people's lessons too. But your past is your lesson, and your present today, that's a gift, man. And each day I wake up, I've got a tremendous perspective on life that I know what a bad day looks like, right? You know, my worst day out here is better than my best day in prison. And, you know, the past is your lesson. The present is a gift. That means your future is your motivation. And you have to be motivated by the right things. You know, those relationships you build along the way, the most important things in life. Servant leadership should be one of your goals. How do you know, I learned how to pray when I was in prison. And I pray every day for the same two things. I don't get into a bunch of prayer for things I think I want or need, but I do ask God every day, man. I get on my knees and say, God, put in front of me what you need me to do today for you, and let me recognize it when I see it. And that's it, man. I don't ask for health or wealth or happiness or anything, because that's not on my line. You know, on my line are 4 things: what I think, say, feel, and do. But if something's put in front of me, I want to do it, Rhett. And I think that's really my sobriety is contingent upon the maintenance of my spiritual growth. And that's how we grow, man. Growth takes place outside your comfort zone. You know that, man. You're an entrepreneur. You read all these books, and all these books talk about making a tremendous mindset change and growth. And none of those things happen when you're stagnant.
Amen to that. How did parenthood change you? Because that's relatively new. I'm kind of curious how that.
Man, you're asking some good questions, because here's something that just happened in parenthood. Man, a couple weeks ago, my stepdaughter's Yorkie, her puppy, her baby, died, and you know, the loss of a dog is hard. It's like a family member, right? But it was the loss of her dog, and she has had such a hard time with this, and to watch, you know, I don't have any kids of my own, and she's got a tremendous father, so she's got a great relationship with her father. So she's not my daughter, but she's with us, you know, 7 on, 7 off. That's a custody agreement. So But the thing about it is, when she's with us, I mean, you know, I have a bond with this little kid. And Kendall told me from the very beginning when I met Clara that, hey, Clara has an amazing father. You don't need to be her dad. You need to be her friend, be a role model, and be there for her, be present, you know, and make her feel like she's important. And I've done all those things. And so Clara and I have a close bond. And to watch your kids suffer and struggle with something like the loss of a pet, that you know, the bargaining with, you know, is the dog coming back, and the dog, can she come back, and her realizing that it's final. It's been tough, Rhett. It's been tough. And I told Kendall the other day that watching her go through that was even harder than having to go through prison, you know, because prison I could make sense of, Rhett, because I did the stuff I did the stuff I was accused of, and I had to go pay a price for the things I did. But it's hard to see a child in pain, you know. But on the flip side of that too, Rhett, to see your stepdaughter so happy and full of joy, you know, we have such a great time in life. These are the two extremes of it, man, and everything in between is just great, man. I mean, she'll paint my nails, she'll put a mud mask on me, and she loves this stuff. I've learned so much more about Barbie than I ever thought I would know, and JoJo Siwa and unicorns and rainbows, but I'm always there for Clara, and anytime she wants to play, I'm there. She's 8 years old, man. She's a wonderful kid, and life has never been better. And that's the two best hats I get to wear, Rhett, are being a husband and a stepfather to that little girl.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that. It is parenthood is a strange thing, but it is there's no more important job, I think, really, at the end of the day. You know, if you make that choice to become a parent in whatever way that happens, you know, it's yeah. So thank you. I mean, that's amazing. How'd your mother and father, how are they doing today? How'd they respond to the promise that you kept in prison? How'd your mom respond?
My mom, first of all, has been amazing. And so we're great. The first 3 years I was out of prison, I lived with them. I mean, the parole people were like, yeah, I'm getting out of prison, nowhere else to go. But I mean, they had a home for me, but parole was like, look, you need to find a place and sit still for a couple of years, man. You're on parole the rest of your life. We'd like to know where you're going to be. So I lived with them. And, you know, look, I mean, hey, 40 years old, moving back in with your parents, there's going to be some struggles there. But our relationship is great today. One of the big things of being in recovery, I tell people all the time, Rhett, is the most important thing in my life, because without that program of recovery, then I'll lose everything else. Anything I put in front of recovery, I'll lose. But with that, I've been able to make amends and try to make things right with my parents. You know, interesting little side story. I've only told a few people about this, but when Jon approached me about doing that book, he said, Damon, we'll split everything 50-50. And he kept his word. I mean, so the first check that came in for the book was big. It's bigger than any check I've ever gotten in my life. And my parents, they put in $50,000 to my legal defense fund back in 2009 and got me a lawyer. I mean, in hindsight, I mean, look, I got a life sentence with their lawyer, but I mean, still, they did. They tried. And they put $50,000. They're both retired. They're on fixed incomes. And so I was able to go to their house with that first big check that I got from writing a book and take it to them and surprise them with it and drop that kind of money in their lap. It blew them away. And it just one of those moments where it's like I knew exactly what I was supposed to be doing with that extra money. And it was nice to be able to give it to them and give back. But they're good, man. They're really good. My mom has found a lot of purpose in life with counseling other mothers that have kids that are incarcerated. Their children are incarcerated. She's found a purpose in that. My dad, my dad's never been a really spiritual guy. Never talked about God or anything like that. I mean, he was at church every Sunday with us. But I find my dad talking more and more about God now, Rhett, because of the experience that he's seen and what he's seen happen in my life. Because, man, the things that are happening with me don't just happen to people coming out of prison, Rhett. I mean, Rhett, I graduated Lamar University in Beaumont.
You're making some of that happen, right? I mean, let's I mean, you're creating because of the way you approach this.
Absolutely.
And God helped in it, but you're doing it. You're doing the recovery. You're doing the things that you gave purpose to your life when it would have been very easy for you to say, I don't really have a purpose anymore, but to
Right.
survive. Right. And I becoming the egg, but you make choices, better
That's
choices.
absolutely right.
And I think that so give credit to where credit's due, man, because you deserve a lot of that credit for making and giving yourself a life of purpose, whether you stayed in prison or whether you got out. And so, yeah, I think that's remarkable. How do you? I know the recovery. How does that? Is it fear now of the consequence of going back to prison if something happened, or what keeps? And I know you've got. I mean, but addiction's hard. And addiction's powerful, and it's a powerful tug and pull. So how do you fight that? I know it's you have a lot of things going on that you help do that, but how do you keep it together?
Great question. So here's the deal. So I'm writing another book right now, and it's about the principles I live my life by. And I don't know when that's going to be done, but I put these principles down because, like I said in the beginning, people want to always know, how did you do it, Damon? How are you doing? Because, like you said, it's a life that, yeah, there's been some things that have happened, but you make some of your own luck too. And you make the right choices, and they have consequences, good and bad. So it's this principle I call playing the tape out all the way to the end. And so a program of recovery, one of the things about a program of recovery, it's not magical. It's tools. It's anything. If you had, if you want to work on something, you need the right tools. If you want to change your life and turn it around, you have to have the right tools, right? So in recovery, you have tools. So one of the tools is that if I have a thought of drinking or doing drugs, I'm supposed to tell someone that's in my program of recovery, because you want to talk to somebody about it. Because an addict has a 3-part process to their thought. They have a thought. That thought becomes an obsession. Let's say it's a thought about drinking or doing drugs. They don't do it right on the spot, but they keep that in their mind. We obsess over things. Addicts obsess. And it goes from a thought to obsession to physical. We eventually do the drug, or we drink, or whatever. So it's 13 months I'm out of prison. It's December of 2016. I'm at a Christmas party with my friend and his wife, and I'm sitting there talking to him, and my friend's wife is drinking a glass of red wine with particularly strong grapes. And then people drink around me all the time, right? My parents drink around me. My wife drinks around me. People that have a vested interest in me never going back to prison, right? And me not relapsing. Don't drink around me, because I'm okay with that. Addicts don't, somebody that's in recovery is okay with people drinking around them, except when they're not. So I'm sitting there talking to my friend and his wife, and the wine, it's got these grapes in it that are just really strong, and it smells so good, Rhett. And I remember smelling that wine. I'm a foot away from her while she's drinking. I'm like, man, that wine smells good, and I bet it tastes good too, man. Oh, man, I bet a glass of wine would be great right now. And then I snap out of it. I'm like, whoa, where'd that come from? So I told my friend and his wife, I said, man, I got to go. I got to take off. So I take off out of the party. I go get in my car outside, and it's at a friend's house, and I'm sitting in the car, and I call my sponsor in AA, all right? And so my sponsor answers the phone, and I was like, hey, man, look, something terrible just happened. He's like, what? So I tell him, I was at a party, and I was tempted to have a drink, and he starts laughing at me, Rhett. And I'm like, why are you laughing, man? This is serious. And he said, man, you are an addict and an alcoholic. You are going to have thoughts like this the rest of your life. He said, that's what we do. He said, your brain is amazing. Your brain likes to repeat success. And that's what our brains do. He said, our brains want to repeat success. It's called euphoric recall. He said, and your brain has forgotten how bad things really were drinking and drugging. And it's thinking about those good times. He said, because you had good times out there, Damon. He said, I had good times too. And this guy's been to prison before. He's been an addict all his life and in recovery for a long time. He said, so I had some fun too, but there were tons more bad times. But my brain doesn't remember the bad times. He said, so what you've done now is you've had this thought about drinking, but you use your first tool, which is to phone somebody. He said, the next tool is called playing the tape out all the way to the end. He said, so I need you to walk through this with me. He said, I want you to imagine that you had that glass of wine. He said, so drink the glass of wine and tell me what you're going to do next, because you didn't stop at wine the last time you were out in the world. What did you drink next? What was your big drink? And I said, all right, if we're going to do this, then bourbon, because bourbon was way better than wine. He said, great, drink the bourbon, man, whatever kind of flavor you like, drink them all up. He said, what next? Because bourbon wasn't where you stopped last time. You kept going from bourbon to what? What's next? And I said, okay, well, cocaine. Because cocaine and bourbon go together perfectly. And we're addicts. We're a couple of addicts, He's like, that's right. Cocaine and bourbon go together perfect. He's got this Boston accent. And so he said, great, do that cocaine, do that bourbon. He said, what next? Because you didn't go to prison over cocaine and bourbon. What are you going to do next? And I said, well, meth, man, because meth was the real monster. That was the one that I couldn't shake meth. He said, good. He said, smoke all the meth you can and let me know, how is parole going right now? And I'm like, oh. I said, he said, yeah. He said, so you can't pass your parole. You can't pass your urinalysis. And he said, so what happens if you can't complete your parole? I said, I go back to prison, man, for the rest of my life. He goes, all right, so where are you now? I said, I'm on that prison bus. I'm chained to another human being. I said, it's hot. It's crazy in here. He said, good. He said, now you know where you are if you take that drink. He said, so go, when you get to prison, he said, go put your bag and your mattress up in your cell. He said, head on down to the chow hall. He said, what was the worst meal they served in prison? And without hesitation, Rhett, I could tell him, pork noodle casserole. I don't know what's in pork noodle casserole, but they serve it 3 or 4 times a week in Texas prisons, and it is nasty. He said, good. He said, go down to that chow hall, get you a big bowl of pork noodle casserole, and wash it down with that glass of wine, because that's where that glass of wine is going to take you next. He said, you feel like you got it now? I said, yeah, I feel like I got it. He said, good. Hang up the phone with me and go back to the party. Have a good time like a normal person. Good night. So by playing the tape out all the way to the end, using one of my tools of recovery, I got to see where an action would take me, the consequences, where they end up. And that's one of the things I share with companies. I tell them all the time, these different principles, but playing the tape out all the way to the end, hey, here's something that's in front of me, but if I do this, then what? Let's keep playing the tape out. And that's important, because I don't think a lot of people think past the moment.
What's your message to the football teams, to the teams that you're talking to?
It's a 2-part message, Rhett. One, it's a warning about the dangers of drugs, the consequences of bad decisions, and it's also a message of hope and perseverance, and showing that the power to change any situation is within you. I want to speak to a population there that, look, a lot of these guys in these major college football programs, they live in a world that's artificial, man. They're in this giant fishbowl. These guys are some of these big programs. There's a lot of people that want a piece of their time and want to be around them. And, that's all going to be gone one day for most of these people. Most of these guys aren't going to go pro, and that's going to be gone one day. But I want to teach them to find their own identities in life too, to find something to hang your hat on. They're important things, the relationships along the way, building yourself to be a good servant leader, because those are the things that are really important. Football is going to fade away from us. Most people don't make it past their college career. Very small percentage go on to play pro. And once that's gone, what are you? Who are you? And that's what I talk to them a lot.
And you know that feeling. I mean, you know what that is.
Sure, because I handled it so poorly myself. Your past is your lesson. My past lesson of how I handled the end of my football career is something to show people, hey, look, you know what? My life can be an example of what not to do, but it also can be an example of what to do in certain situations too. And I think people have a hard time with the humility involved with saying, hey, my past, don't repeat the past of this part. I don't make the mistakes I made. I mean, because I don't mind that now, though, Rhett. I think that's what my purpose is to go out there and be that message of hope for others, and also be a warning to some.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, I mean, you just answered that question. I was going to ask you, how do you talk about it so easily? Because it seems easy to talk about.
Yeah, because I feel called to do it in the sense that, look, I've never taken any speaking classes. I've never taken any writing classes, but I've been given this ability to articulate a story through the written word and through the verbal word. And that's just, I guess, the gift that I was born with, and I've worked on. It didn't just come like naturally, just right off the bat. I mean, you've got to practice and work at anything you do. But I've been given this ability to do that, and so I have a story to tell. And I think the story is more powerful than any feelings I could have of being apprehensive, of trepidation. I think the story is so powerful, and there's so much in this story for more than just one group of people. Every group I've ever spoken in front of, somebody takes different from the story. Someone takes away something different, and I think that's important. I think it's an inclusive story. One of the things I talk about too is, Rhett, I'm a criminal justice professor now. I went back to school and got my master's in criminal justice, And the University of Houston downtown said, hey, we'd love to have you teach our prisons class. So a few weeks ago, I became a professor at the University of Houston downtown teaching a class called Prisons in America. But one of the things I told the University of Houston is that, look, if I do this class, I'm going to talk about the prison in America that I saw from the inside, not necessarily what your textbook says. And they're like, well, what does that mean? I'm like, well, that there's more than one justice system in America. There's a white one, there's a black one, there's a brown one, there's a rich one, there's a poor one. And and it just depends on where you fall into this stuff. But part of that message is something I can share inside those college rooms around a lot of athletes. Hey, look, not everybody in this room is going to be seen by the justice system in the same way. Some of you can't afford to get your picture or your mugshot into this thing because it's a machine with teeth and it will grind you up, So, yeah, I think that there's an importance to the message I have, and I think that makes it easier to tell it.
I think that's. I'm glad you're able to do that, because I do think that I think a lot of kids struggle. I can see a lot of kids that struggle with the same issues of that identity. When it's something that you've done all your life, until you're 20 years old, and you've been playing football or sports or whatever it is, the amount of time that you spend, it becomes your identity. I think that's true. And that's a hard thing to sort of get your head around. It's hard enough graduating from college to figure out what you want to do with your life, but to have that added pressure of going from the spotlight and being, when you play sports on campus, you have things are pretty easy, and all of a sudden, you don't have that same support, and I think that's a challenge for every kid that age, I think. Did you ever get to? Was it Mr. Jackson in the Dallas County? Did you ever get to thank him?
I never have. So here's the deal, Rhett. So Mr. Jackson, that's not his real name. He went by the name Muhammad. He was a Muslim convert in there. I call him Mr. Jackson for the sake of the story. Because to me, it seems like the story is going to be more well received in this country, as opposed to going around saying Muhammad told me this and Muhammad told me that. Those guys, when they change your name to a Muslim name in prison, they give up what's called their government name. Think about Muhammad Ali. He was Cassius Clay, but he became Muhammad Ali in prison. This guy's name was Muhammad as well. So I don't know his name. I don't know his birth date. I do know that my best chance to find him is to go around and keep telling the story, and hopefully that it gets picked up somewhere. If he's in the prison system, he'll find me, because I write an article. They have a prison newspaper in Texas. It's been around since 1928. It's called The Echo.
Really?
And now I'm a contributing writer for The Echo. It goes to all 150,000 inmates. Every other month, an issue comes out. All 104 prisons in Texas get a copy of The Echo, and the inmates all get copies. And when you're in prison, man, you wait for this paper to come out. It's like they've got a subscribership of 150,000. What newspaper still has that, right? But The Echo does. So I get to write a column for The Echo, and it's just one of the coolest things in the world. But my column is called The Coffee Bean, and it's a column about positivity that I speak directly to every inmate in the Texas prison system. And one of the cool things, my passion, Rhett, is to go into these prisons. I got approached by the general manager from the Indianapolis Colts the other day. And the GM gets in touch with me, and he's like, hey, man, look. He said, I just read your book, The Change Agent, and it blew me away. He said, it's something. He said, I'd love to have you come here and talk to the players. And he said, I looked you up, and you're really into going back into the prisons. And he said, I think that's great, man. He said, that's pretty amazing that you're willing to do that. I said, look, man, not only am I willing to do that, but when I come out there to talk to the Colts, I said, I'd like to talk to a prison in Indianapolis. If you can get me into a prison, that'd be great. He said, I'll do you one better. I'll send some players in with you from the Colts. And so right now we're talking about maybe pitching this to the NFL that, look, bring me in to speak to your teams, all 32 of your teams. And when I'm in the NFL city, we go into a prison in that NFL city or state with players. That's a powerful message, Rhett. Because sports is big in prison. And this message, this story that I have, I've got a unique currency to spend with the incarcerated, Rhett. Maybe more so than any other population. Look, companies bring me in and they'll buy 500 copies of the Coffee Bean or 1,000 copies of the Coffee Bean. And we go in there and we talk about turning their company into a pot of coffee. And that's great. I love it. But it gives me the means to be able to go in and volunteer in the prisons. When the Coffee Bean, this is what the cool connection with Jon Gordon and Dabo Swinney has created. So the Coffee Bean became a bestseller in July. And After it did, I called the state senator that runs the Criminal Justice Committee. He's the chairman of the Criminal Justice Committee, Senator Whitmire. And so I said, Senator Whitmire, I've got a book that became a bestseller. I said, look, I want to donate a copy of The Coffee Bean and The Change Agent to every prison library in Texas, all 104 of them, because I spent so much time in those prison libraries, reading books that would help me grow. So I said, I want to donate a copy of both of my books to the inmates in Texas prisons. And I said, but I want you to help me get into these prisons. I want to go to all 104 of these prisons. I'll pay for it all, and it'll be on my dime. It'll be the Coffee Bean Prison Tour. And man, the state of Texas got behind it. They've cleared the decks for me to do it. So in December, I'm at my recovery meeting, and I'm talking to my sponsor and this other guy named Will. And so Will is in recovery too, and he and his dad and his brother have a company they're worth about $1 billion. Their company here in Texas. And so I'm telling him about my prison tour, and he's like, Damon, I would love to go on that prison tour with you, man. He said, that would help me stay sober too. Because the director of prisons, when he asked me, he said, I really got one question for you, boy. Why do you want to do all this? He said, what's in it for you? And I said, Director, I get to stay sober, man. That's what's in it for me. I said, if I'm not sober, I can't give what I don't have. So I get to stay sober. So this guy, Will, at this meeting is telling me, man, I want to stay sober too. That sounds like a great deal. I'd love to go on the prison tour with you. And I was like, well, Will, you're approved to go into Texas prisons. I mean, that's great. Hop in the car. He said, you're not understanding this, man. We have planes in our company. We'll just take private jets all over the Texas prison system. We're going on a 104 prison tour in the state of Texas by private plane, Rhett. Have you ever heard about anybody in business using their private plane to go to prisons? First time ever, man. It's unbelievable. It's one of the coolest things I've ever been a part of. We start next month, the Coffee Bean Prison Tour, and we're just going to take the planes and hop from one prison to the next. They've got municipal airports all over Texas. It's really cool. Hello? Hello?